loss of 5 lives on June 18th, 2023, while conducting deep-sea operations in the vicinity of the RMS Titanic wreck site. I have previously determined that OceanGate Incorporated is a party in interest to this investigation. OceanGate is represented by the law firm of Debevoise and Plimpton. As such, OceanGate has a statutory right to employ counsel to represent them, to cross-examine witnesses, and to have witnesses called on their behalf. I will examine all witnesses at this formal hearing under oath or affirmation, and witnesses will be subject to federal laws and penalties governing false official statements. Witnesses who are not parties in interest may be advised by their counsel concerning their rights. However, such counsel may not examine or cross-examine other witnesses or otherwise participate in these proceedings. These proceedings are open to the public and to the media. I ask for the cooperation of all persons present to minimize any disruptive influence on the proceedings in general and on the witnesses in particular. The members of the press are welcome, and an area has been set aside for your use during these proceedings. The news media may question witnesses concerning the testimony they have given after I have released them from these proceedings. I ask that such interviews be conducted outside of this courtroom. Since the date of the casualty, the National Transportation Safety Board, NTSB, and Coast Guard have conducted substantial evidence collection activities, and some of that previously collected evidence will be considered during these hearings. Should any person have or believe they have information not brought forward, but which might be of direct significance, that person is urged to bring that information to my attention by emailing titan@uscg.mil. The Coast Guard relies on strong partnerships to execute its missions, and this Marine Board investigation is no exception. The NTSB provided a representative for this hearing. Mr. Marcel Muse, seated to my far right, is the investigator in charge for the NTSB investigation. Mr. Muse, would you like to make a brief statement?
Good morning again. I'm Marcel Muse, the investigator in charge for the National Transportation Safety Board assigned to this accident. The NTSB has joined this hearing to avoid the duplication of facts. Following the proceedings, the NTSB will produce its own report separate from the Coast Guard as required by law. That report may or may not include recommendations to prevent future accidents such as this one.
Thank you. Before we commence with testimony today, I have one clarification statement to make to the record from Mr. David Lockridge's testimony on September 17th. In his testimony on Tuesday, Mr. Lockridge referenced his 2018 settlement agreement with OceanGate, which contained non-disclosure provisions. He also stated that he was testifying pursuant to a Coast Guard subpoena at this hearing. To clarify the point, through its counsel, I wanted to clarify that OceanGate, through its counsel, Debevoise and Plimpton, who were retained after this tragic incident last year, had released Mr. Lockridge from any NDA provisions to the extent they could have restricted him from cooperating with this investigation. That release occurred on August 21st, 2023, in response to a request from Mr. Lockridge's counsel on August 20th, 2023. Mr. Lockridge was therefore free to cooperate and cooperated with this investigation following that release. We will now call our first witness of the day, Ms. Renata Rojas, who was a mission specialist on a Titan expedition. Ms. Rojas, please come forward to the witness table. Good morning, Ms. Rojas. Lieutenant Steele will administer your oath.
Good morning.
Yes.
Could you please stand and raise your right hand? A false statement given to an agency of the United States is punishable by fine and/or imprisonment under 18 U.S.C. 1001. Knowing this, do you solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? So help you God. Thank you. You may be seated.
Ms. Rojas, I see that you have counsel present with you here today. Counselor, can you please identify yourself and your firm for the record?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, my name is John Werner. I'm with the law firm of Lyons and Floyd.
Sir, can you energize your microphone and just repeat that, please?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. My name is John Werner, and I'm with the law firm of Lyons and Flood.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Rojas, before we begin, I understand this can be an emotional testimony. If you need any time, please just let me know, and we will take a recess and reconvene.
Okay.
I will now pass the questioning to Lieutenant Commander Nicole Emmons.
Good morning, Ms. Rojas. Thank you for being here today. And as Mr. Neubauer stated, please just stop me if you need a break at any time. Okay. All of my questions today are related to your background and then your experiences with OceanGate as a mission specialist and a volunteer. There's two exhibit binders in front of you. If we pull up an exhibit, you're more than welcome to use those, but we'll also pull them up on the monitors as well.
Okay.
And before we begin, I'll ask you to please refrain from using any acronyms, and if you do, just kind of explain what they are for the record.
Okay.
So, Ms. Rojas, can you explain your background and work history before you became involved with OceanGate? Just kind of give us a little background on what you did.
You mean my business background?
Correct. Yes, ma'am.
I'm a banker in New York City. I do sales and trading. Have an MBA from Columbia University in finance.
So with your background as being a banker, how did you become a mission specialist with OceanGate? Can you kind of give us the whole history and background on how you came to become involved with them?
I've been a scuba diver since I'm age 12. Pretty much the ocean is a place I feel very comfortable in. I've been pretty much obsessed with the Titanic since I'm age 11 or 12. Before it was found. I actually wanted to find the wreck, but somebody beat me to it and told me that they were not going to go back. So I did banking instead of oceanography and tried to find a way to go to Titanic once I find out that, non-scientists could go. Signed up first with Deep Ocean Expeditions, which was at the time run by Rob McCollum. I was scheduled to go with them. The expeditions were postponed twice, then canceled. And through that connection with Rob McCollum, he actually is the one that mentioned that he knew somebody who had plans to go to Titanic. So that was the first time I heard about OceanGate. The second time I heard about OceanGate was through astronaut training. I actually thought, well, I can't go to Titanic, maybe I can go to space. And through astronaut training, I decided that with little money I had saved to go to Titanic, which I had been saving for a long time, was going to be to go to Titanic. And through Virgin Galactic, which was the ones doing the training, they told me, oh, we know somebody who has plans to build us up to go to Titanic. And so I mentioned, they said, OceanGate Expeditions. I said, yes. And they were the ones who actually made the email connection. At this point, Stockton, who had heard my name twice, said, well, might as well meet Renata. He came to New York. I think I have in my notes, I think it was May 2015. We met for coffee. He told me a sub had not been made, that he had plans to make a sub to go to Titanic. It was going to take time. But he wanted me to go out on other expeditions and, kind of test the waters of how they did things. They were planning to go to the Andrea Doria, 2016. It's a shipwreck that I myself was already planning to dive, since I do have several technical dive certifications. The latest one is closed circuit rebreathers for Trimix at 100 meters. So, although it's a wreck that I could dive, I said, well, maybe in a sub I can see a lot more than diving. So I signed up for the expedition. And that's basically how the relationship started.
Thank you. You kind of mentioned your diving certificates. Can you kind of go into that with us and what those are and what you have?
Right. Obviously, open water, advanced water, rescue diver, scientific diver, cave diving, ice diving, side mount, trimix is open circuit, and then closed CCRs or closed circuit rebreathers up to trimix to 100 meters.
And did you have any experience with submersibles before OceanGate?
Not before OceanGate. I did have the opportunity to go down to the wreck of the Titanic in Greece with another operator in a Triton sub.
Thank you. How many dives, and you can estimate too, but how many dives have you conducted with OceanGate? Approximately.
Andrea Doria, Hudson Canyon, one in Seattle. We did a few test dives with Titan. I think it was 2 of them, and then my Titanic dive.
Thank you. Were those all as a mission specialist or?
Correct.
Okay. And what platforms did you conduct those dives that you just mentioned on? There's submersibles at OceanGate. They had a few. So.
Cyclops 1 for Andrea Doria, Hudson Canyon, and the one in Puget Sound, Seattle. Titan, second hull Titan, 2021 and 22.
Can you explain to us, in your eyes, what a mission specialist is?
Yeah, mission specialist gets a little bit differentiated because he's somebody who gets involved in the operation. It's a volunteer basis position. It's a role that you take only if you feel comfortable with the role and you have a knowledge of what you're going to be doing. You're always supervised, always working with somebody who's giving you guidance. And it's really, it sounds very glamorous, but it's really just standing by to see if anybody needs a wrench.
To become a mission specialist with OceanGate, did you have to pay OceanGate any money?
Well, the payment was for the dive. You had the option once you showed up to the expedition if you wanted to participate or you wanted just to be an observer and passenger.
Can you kind of explain how the payments worked when you paid for the dive that you said? Like, who did you write that out to? Who did that go to? Who did you work with to coordinate that?
Once you said yes, they would send you basically instructions for payment for a wire transfer, and you paid. I can't remember exactly who I paid. I think Andrea Doria was Argus Expeditions. I don't remember who Hudson Canyon was. I'm assuming it's also Argus Expeditions. I can't remember exactly the wire transfer. I don't recall at this time.
Okay, thank you. And what is your understanding, or what were you told that your payment was for?
Well, you were given a contract that details, okay, you're giving a deposit by this date, you're giving the balance or 40% at a second date, certain amount is refundable if you cancel by X number of days before the expedition, or there's a portion that is not refundable as well. It's very well understood that if you show up and the weather doesn't cooperate, you don't get a refund. And it's just escalated. It's just normal contracts. And then once you get the detail when to pay and the dates, is basically send them a wire transfer. You also have to sign medical forms, get a medical, all of that, and you have to submit them before you go on an expedition.
And I know you kind of went into it a little bit about the refund policy. Can you kind of go into more detail on that? What exactly you could get a refund for?
There wasn't really a lot of refunds. I guess you could get a refund if you gave a deposit at the beginning, like a year in advance, and then 6 months before the expedition, you canceled, you would get a refund. I don't have that contract in front of me. I'm sure we can probably pull it out, but it was very clearly stated when you would be able to get a refund or not. It was pretty clear that once you started to get a deposit and you were signed on, that you were running the risk that if you did not get your money back, you may not get your money back.
Did you ever get a refund or have to use a refund process with your dives?
No. I think Stockton in particular was very fair that if you did not get the dive that he wanted you to have, he would bring you along for other expeditions. He was always fair in trying to make you square. So for Titanic, if you decided very last minute you didn't want to do it, he said, we'll figure it out. We'll do something else.
And those contracts that you signed, were those kind of the same contracts for the Andrea Doria dive, for the Hudson Canyon dives? Did they all kind of?
I think it evolutionized as, you know, from Andrea Doria to Titanic. I think the Titanic one was a little bit longer. I mean, there was a different dive than doing the Andrea Doria, right?
Okay, thank you. And I know you kind of mentioned this, you could do as much or as little as you wanted as a mission specialist. So would you consider yourself part of the crew? Specifically for you, did you kind of work with the crew, or did you take more of the passenger, I'm just gonna ride
I
this out?
was one of the few that really took on the role of a mission specialist. I enjoyed it. It was fun. I was learning a lot. I was working with amazing people. Some of those people are the very hardworking individuals that were just trying to make dreams come true.
Did you ever receive any training from OceanGate? Can you kind of take us through that, the training you received to do those jobs that you just described?
Yeah, obviously, for any position that you're going to be helping somebody out, you meet with that person, they go in detail with what they're going to be doing, what they're going to need from you. And as I said, some of that might be just, this is where the wrenches are. When I ask you for a wrench, this is where you come and grab a wrench. Sometimes it was just keeping the container clean. I joke around that I was a cleaning lady, but if you got familiar to where all the equipment was, when somebody asked for anything, a wrench, or the drill, anything like that, you knew where it was, you could hand it over. And it was just to make their job a little bit easier.
Thank you.
So yes, you had a walkabout of what were you going to do, what were you going to be exposed to, are you comfortable doing this? Did you rather just stand around? Just get you familiar with the procedures.
And was that on every dive you kind of played that role?
Yeah.
I know you had mentioned about the medical and the physical, so we're going to kind of get into that a little bit. Lieutenant Steele, can you pull up Coast Guard Exhibit 009, which is what we have as a mission specialist job description? Are you familiar with this document, or have you seen this document?
Yeah, I haven't seen it in a long time, but yes. Get my glasses.
Oh, yes, please.
See it in the binder.
Oh, good.
And we're going to kind of look on the first page there
Yeah.
under physical
I've
duties.
seen this.
Okay. Was that used Was that given to you like when you first made your payment for your first dives? Or was this given
When
to
you
you
get on
later?
the ship, they show you this, for you to understand if this is what you want to get involved in. You have to kind of pick a role. Do you want to work with the science team? Do you want to work with communications? Do you want to, work with the divers? Being a scuba diver and an extremely well-trained scuba diver, I was usually in the dinghy with the divers. It wasn't read every time. And you read it once and you kind of know, okay, I'm familiar with what I'm going to do.
I'm just going to turn your attention to paragraphs 2 and 3, where it talks about the physical duties, and I'm just going to read it for the record. It says a mission specialist color vision must allow them to recognize color-coded objects such as electrical components, navigation lights, hazardous cargo placards, dock warning lights, pipes, and valves. Did you ever perform any duties related to working with electrical components?
No.
It also talks about the hearing in the next paragraph. It says a mission specialist hearing must be adequate for assuring his or her own personal safety while working in a machinery space which has high levels of background noise, for detecting changes in the operating sounds of machinery, and for hearing alarms, signals from the vessel, and signals from passing vessels. So as a mission specialist, did you ever work in machinery spaces?
No, but in order to get to the platform where the submersible was placed, you had to go through a section where there was a lot of machinery and there was a lot of noise.
On page 2, under the expedition duty specifically, it says under submersible operations support there, it states that duties may include scheduled vessel maintenance and electrical and compressed air charging systems. So as a mission specialist, did you ever conduct any vessel maintenance?
No. I observed it,
Okay.
but I was never responsible for.
Understood, thank you. Were you ever, and I know you mentioned this, so we'll kind of go into the physical limitations for the overall health because of these requirements. They said they made you get a physical. Can you kind of go into the requirements for your physical abilities and what you had to do?
I still do my annual physical every year. You do have to go through a hearing test, a visual test, to be certified that you're fit. You disclose any medical conditions, and then that's it. I think I'm so used to doing it every year that I still do it now. You have to do it for diving as well. Every time you take a technical certification course, you have to go through a physical as well.
Do you know if other mission specialists that you've worked with had to go through the same physical process to be evaluated?
I can't speak for anybody else. I can only speak to what was required of me and what I did.
Okay.
I'm assuming so.
Can you kind of, and we'll get into your dives specifically, what you did on each dive, but can you kind of just take us through a typical dive as a mission specialist from the very start of your involvement to the finish? Kind of what did that look like? Nope.
Sorry.
No, you're fine. Just the planning meetings that were involved, the assigned task, how that worked, just kind of take us through a typical dive as a mission specialist.
That's a loaded question. Can we break it down?
Correct,
Maybe
yes, we can.
Exactly what do you want to know?
Sure, so from the start, you show up, you're gonna go take a dive, is there any meetings at the pier, at the dock? How did that, when you arrived?
I'm actually going to take it back. We would always get phone calls before we got on an expedition to update us on the vehicle, the vessel, how are we going to get there, what time we're going to get there, what has been done and not done to the submersible. They give you a full presentation of everything. I'm sure you have them. They give it to everybody. They usually held by Zoom, and anybody could come in. Once you made your plans to come in, you had to tell them, here's all my paperwork, including waiver. Everything had to be already read and signed. You could also go through it when you got on the ship, but you signed all of that, you gave them your estimated time of arrival, somebody usually waited for you, either at the dock or even at the airport. Be driven to the vessel. You get in the vessel, you get introduced to the captain of the ship as well, who you are, what you're gonna do. Sit down, have a sit down to go through the waiver again, and what you're gonna do, what you wanna do, what was next. This is the events of the day. You know, as I said, you're mostly just observing and watching. If you wanna say, hey, can I help you with that? You need to say, yeah, come here, help. As I said, the helping is mostly watching what they're doing and them teaching you what they're doing. Then usually there was a briefing the night before any dives, and then the morning of the dives, where you actually went through a very detailed dive plan, hour by hour, time by time, roles. The night before, obviously, they asked you, what do you think, what do you feel comfortable doing, where you want to be? Sometimes you felt comfortable going in, sometimes you didn't. And then the operation starts, right? And they do make you aware that if you're going to get involved, you're gonna be there for 12 hours. A change of crew is a significant change in their dive plan, and they designated it as a strike. They had a 3-strike rule in the safety procedures with a certain number of anomalies was 1 strike. Anomalies could have been anything small from a rope being out of place, not having water in the sub, very simple stuff. Can't remember the number of anomalies, if it was 6 or 9, but a number of anomalies was a strike. And then strikes were things that were a little bit bigger, like sonar wasn't working. There was a change of crew. You were late in the dive plan. You took more than an hour was the strikes. And if you got to a point where you got to a 3rd strike, the dive was called, no questions asked. It was like 3 strikes, we're going back to whatever point you were. You could have been in the water already diving, and if you have a 3rd strike, you just go back. Anyway, all that is explained to you, and so you need to understand that if you are gonna volunteer to be on the dinghy boat with the divers, you're gonna be there for a while. Take a risk index of how do you feel that day. How you feel, from 0 to 7. How do you feel today? You feel tired, you need rest, et cetera, and all of that before the dives. And then, you start operations.
You mentioned the strike rule, kind of a no-go. Who was the one that determined then, like, we're not
I
going
think
to
it was the mission director.
The mission director, okay. And were you ever on a dive that was a no-go, that had
Yeah.
3 strikes?
Mm-hmm.
We're going to kind of shift into the specific dives and ask you about that. We're going to start with the Andrea Doria dive in Boston in 2016. What was your role? Were you a mission specialist on that dive? Or what was your role on that dive?
To take care of the cameras and the pictures and the GoPros inside the sub.
Okay.
I had also my own GoPros.
And did you pay for that dive?
I did,
Were there any other passengers with you on that dive?
yes.
And how many other passengers?
A friend of mine, Arthur Vaccarino, and one of Stockton's best friends, Chris.
And how many other employees or crew members, I'd call them, of
Stockton and David Lockridge.
Can you kind of go into that dive for us from the very beginning, as you had talked about, like starting from the beginning of when that occurred, and take us through that dive for us?
Sure. I had a lot of fun at the dive. It was a great dive. As I said, I wanted to do the dive in in a submersible because I was planning to do an actual dive in open circuit in the shipwreck, programmed for literally the month after. Arthur as well, who was with me. Got transferred, we did the debriefing or the briefing, how things were gonna go. We were transferred from the ship in a dinghy to the platform. That Cyclops was pulled all the way from Boston to Nantucket, as they do on the platform behind the ship. So you have to transfer yourself from the main ship to the platform to get in the sub. In the sub, there was already David and Stockton doing their checks. By the time we got in, checks were done. Get comfortable. They give you a little screen where you can actually see sonar. You go through a briefing, obviously, on all the aspects of the submersible. What happens if this happens? What do you do if somebody faints? Things like that, emergency procedures inside the sub. The different roles, who's going to be doing what. I was taking care of the pictures. Somebody else was taking care of the scans. We were supposed to do sonar scans of the Andrea Doria. Somebody else was taking care of making sure how many fish we saw. We were logging the biodiversity of the surrounding area of the Andrea Doria. We submerged. The first time we landed really far away from the Andrea Doria, so we came back to the surface. Again, it's only 70 meters, which is, you can swim out, basically. People free dive that deep. So we could come back very quickly. We got pulled closer to the wreck now that we had a calculation on the current. And in the Andrea Doria, the currents are 2 knots or 4 sometimes. It's in the channel, in the shipping channel. So, if you're not diving in slack tide, you're going to get taken away by the current. Came back to the surface. They dragged us on the surface. They dragged the submersible to position us in a position that the current would take us and place us near the wreck. It took a long time, but we saw dolphins go by, whales. So it was actually pretty amazing to see. Second time we went down. Landed gently on the sand, and we were only like maybe 50 meters from the bow. I think they had it on the sonar that it was 100 meters. They could see it. In our little iPads, I think it was 50 meters. So I couldn't see it on my iPad, but they could see it on their sonar. We started navigating towards the wreck. Communications were spotty. They had to talk very loudly on the microphone in order for them to hear, and it was hard to hear them, but we had communications. Communications, at least for this dive, were through radio, not text. As we got closer to the Doria, took a couple of scans. At some point, it was very close. The propellers would pick up a lot of sand, so it's low visibility to begin with. But with the propellers lifting off the sand, it's not that very easy to see. So we would go and stand, and make decisions of, okay, where are we, et cetera. At some point, we saw the bow. We actually asked them to turn the lights off so we can kind of see where we were. They turned the lights back on, making a plan to kind of go around so we could take a scan. And at some point, we ended up right below the bow, in the prow. If you guys are maritime, you know what the prow is. We were at the prow. In a position, I think, was the sand had like a hole, and you could definitely see the top of the bow on the hatch. So it was a very, we did have a lot of room to maneuver. So Stockton was trying to get us out hopping, doing bunny hops. It's like, so he wouldn't race, we didn't want to touch anything. Sand is very muddy there, so it's not easy to kind of ski out. It's not like you can push yourself as you're skiing. Then at some point, Lockridge took the controls. He put his head on top of the hatch, where you could actually see very well the bow, and very nicely drove us out in one sweep. I was actually very impressed. And then that was it. We took pictures of the bow, claps everybody, and went back to the surface, took pictures, and it was great. I took a lot of video, personal video myself of the dive. If the committee wants to take a look at it, happy to submit it, so you can kind of get a sense of what that dive was like. I did see David Lockridge's account of the events, and he must have gone on a different dive. Nobody was panicking, nobody was crying, and there was definitely no swearing and yelling.
Do you know, you said Mr. Lockridge took the controls. Do you know if Mr. Rush, since he was the pilot on that, correct, going down, do you know why he had to take the controls?
Lockridge or David?
Well, Mr. Lockridge.
I don't know why he had to take the controls. He kept asking for the controls now. The pilot was, to me, clearly Stockton.
And he took you down there,
Yes,
and then at some point,
and he was driving the whole time, yeah.
except for the last part, correct?
Yeah, the last part as we were trying to maneuver out of the prow. Lockridge had a better view going into the viewport, not the viewport, the hatch. If you could poke your head in, stand, not sit, stand, and actually have a 360 view. So he was in a better position to kind of maneuver and not touch anything and maneuver out. So he asked for the controller. Stockton gave him the controller, and he drove us out.
Can you kind of explain for us, I know you said where he was, how was the rest of the seating arrangements on board? Like, where were you on board and the
I
other two
was-
passengers?
I was right at the dome,
Okay.
right at the dome where all the cameras were. You know, my job was to make sure all the cameras were on, so that's what I was doing, was trying to change all the cameras. I think Arthur Chris was next to me. There was 2 seats in the front in the dome. I was in one part, Chris was in the other, and I think Arthur was right behind me.
And the pilot then sits further
Yeah,
rear?
the pilot sits. Cyclops is about the size of a van. So if you're all the way in the front, the pilot is like 2 seats away. So he's not that close. The hatch is right in the middle. I mean, you're going to say a little bit to the front. So even if you're standing, it's not like somebody can just hand you over, something like that. You need to kind of go down and go to the back. The back is you're wedged in the back because you need to have the room to see the 2 screens and all of the controls.
Were you aware that on the Cyclops 1, that it wasn't inspected or classed or certificated before you went on that dive?
I didn't even ask. It was a 70-meter dive.
Was vessel classification or inspection ever brought up or discussed with you as a mission specialist?
Yes.
And what was told you
I
about
think
that?
they were very transparent on giving you the specs of, this is, especially when it came to Cyclops 2 or Titan, that it was experimental, not classified. had plenty of opportunity to ask why it was not classified. You were giving a very transparent response.
And at the time, as a mission specialist or with your previous experience in the maritime realm, were you aware of any regulations regarding passengers aboard submersibles? Was that ever discussed with you?
I was aware of them, yes.
Was there any discussions with you about regarding Coast Guard or regulatory oversight departing Boston? Did you have any contacts that you're aware of with the Coast Guard, alerting them of your dive?
I know people that work in the Coast Guard. I'm a scuba diver in the Northeast, deep shipwreck diver who has knowledge that the Coast Guard has. You know, if you have an accident at sea with a decompression, you do call the Coast Guard. So I had a lot of friends who were very well aware that I was going to be in the Andrea Doria, and they were going to be watching in case there was any issues. I knew if there was any issues, somebody would be there in 4 hours diving and take us out. So I don't think I had any concerns.
Was that something, letting people know where you were, was that something you did, or was that something the company did as well? Are you aware of if they made notification to anyone where they were
I'm
diving?
sure they did. The dive plans always had contacts of who to contact in case of an emergency, and the Coast Guard was always listed there.
Okay. We're going to kind of shift to the Hudson Canyon dive in 2020. What was your role on that dive? Was it also as a mission specialist?
Yes,
And did you pay to be part of that dive as well?
correct.
Can you kind of take us through that dive, same way you did with the Andrea Doria? Were there other passengers with you, how that worked, and kind of just go into that dive?
It was almost, I'm not going to say in the middle of COVID, but it was masks and the whole works. You had to, there was several briefings before that of what to do before to isolate yourself for at least, 2 weeks, not seeing anybody if you wanted to do this dive. Giving you also timelines where we should be. You had to get a COVID test, like the 24 hours, send it in. They did a COVID test as you boarded the ship. There were other 2 passengers on the dive with me, Mike Reese and his wife. As we arrived on the ship, I actually recognized the captain of the ship because he's a very good friend of the captain of my dive boat. So we said hi, somebody I knew. We went through briefings, after COVID test and briefings, et cetera. You still had to keep your mask for a day before you could take it off. I think that day we kind of just witnessed preparations of the sub, went through weather, sat down for dinner, then we went to sleep. The next morning, as we arrived we had watches, 2-hour watches to watch the submersible that was on the platform that was being pulled. It was not normal for them to be pulling a platform behind them with a sub. And Hudson Canyon being far, you had to kind of watch with binoculars in your 2 hours. So you did your watch, you went back to sleep, and next morning's breakfast, get ready for the dive. In this dive, I was also took care of the camera, so I didn't really have to go on any dinghies. The Reeses decided that I don't think they were going to participate much. They were going to be passengers, not mission specialists. I think we played around in the bridge and took pictures and did interviews. We kind of kept the time that way. Once we got to the Hudson Canyon, got transferred, we did a debrief as usual. This is going to be the day, the operation, who's going to be in what role, how do you feel this morning, the whole procedure. They would explain to you, obviously, the 3-strike rule. I think that's something they borrowed from space, from the space program. Boarded from the ship to the dinghy, from the dinghy to the platform, get into on the submersible. You get in the submersible, and as they're pulling you in position, you're being given instructions by the pilot about what you're going to do, what are you doing this, what is this button, what's this other button, how things are going to go, etc. Once they close the hatch, you pull you into a position where you're going to be, we wanted to be close to the wall of the canyon wall. Started dropping. I was actually very excited to see the Reeses, who have never really been underwater, to see their reaction to all the little animals going through the dome. Squid, we saw squid. It was just very exciting to see them. You know, I'm a diver here, so I do see animals, but seeing it through somebody's eyes was pretty amazing. We landed in the bottom, trying to get directions to get to the wall because we're in sand. At some point, we stumbled into lobster pots with a lot of life, and we kind of just followed, with a sonar, we just followed the lobster pots. It was far away from the wall, but that was a lot more interesting in terms of animals. We saw squid, crabs, lobster, animals, plants. It was pretty amazing. You had to log. Part of the job was making sure you logged every animal that you saw and the time. Yeah, I'm not sure where that information went to, but that was the science we were trying to do. And you know, it got to a point where they called us back up. You had to back up. We went back up. We parked the sub. It takes a couple of tries to maneuver that sub into the platform. I also have videos of that, if you want them. You have to kind of do it in a certain way, and the skids have to be in place. Somebody, if you're looking at the dome, you tell them, oh, yeah, you're going the right way. There's two tanks on that platform, so sometimes you kind of just hit the tanks and stumble like that. You kind of just go down. They guide you in. And that was it. We came back up, had a debrief, had dinner. You know, they always had an interview on how was your experience, what would you change, would you have done anything differently. You know, they wanted feedback. And then that's it. We went back to New York.
Do you know any of the feedback that was given and discussed on that dive?
Those were individual feedbacks with either Stockton or the mission expedition leader.
And I'm sorry, and if you've mentioned this, but who was the pilot on that specific dive?
Stockton.
Okay. Thank you for that, Ms. Rojas. I think we're going to take, I'll pass it to Mr. Newberger.
Yeah, before we go to a different line of questioning, can we take a 10-minute recess?
Yep.
Thank you, Ms. Rojas.
Thank you.
The hearing is now in recess, and we'll reconvene at 9:35.
Thank you.
Rojas, are you ready to reconvene? Okay. The hearing will now reconvene, and Commander Emmons will continue with the line of questioning. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Rojas, we're going to kind of shift to the Titanic expeditions. When did you sign up to be involved in the Cyclops 2 at the time, which is Titan? When did you sign up to conduct those dives to the Titanic?
Knowing that Stockton had plans to build a sub to go to Titanic, and me literally waiting for years to go see it, I think I signed up 2016, 17 maybe.
And what specific Titanic expedition did you sign up to do? Was there a year? Like what expedition did you sign up for? You said you signed up in 2017, but
After the Andrea Doria, once there were plans to create a submersible, I gave them a deposit.
and was that deposit to go to like the first Titanic expedition?
And yeah, there was, as far as I was concerned at that time, there was only one Titanic expedition. And that was April. In my notes, I wrote it down. April 2017 is when I made payment.
And were you told when they were supposed to conduct that expedition?
The plans were for 2018, but the sub had to be created and tested. So it was still a question mark, but the plans originally were 2018.
2018. And then they went in 2021. So what happened, if the plan was 2018, did you go in 2019 then?
I visited the Bahamas twice while they were doing testing, so I wanted to see what testing was like. First time I arrived, there was a electrical storm that created problems not only with Cyclops 2, but also other vessels in the vicinity. So they just practiced drills, that sub drills, operations. I stayed there the whole week just to watch all of that. Then I went back. I think April 2019, also to witness just operations and testing dives. Periodically throughout that year or two, we were given progression of the testing. Today we did a dive to 400 meters. Today we did a dive to 600 meters. Unmanned, manned, I think Stockton ended up getting in the sub to do a manned dive after 5 dives, progressive dives. I knew when in my visit in 2018 that 2018 was not going to happen from the beginning, and 2019 he was going to try, but it was in question. You know, testing had to finish first. In 2019. Again, he said, I'm sorry, we're going to have to postpone. 2020 was not possible because of COVID. So then it became 2021.
Did he give you a reason in 2019 why it had to be postponed?
I think there was a couple of things. One was the main ship that they had planned or they had booked to try to go, canceled on them. That obviously was difficult to obviously get deposits back, so there was some financial strain there. And then also the sub had to be redone, so a new hull had to be made.
Did they give you any reason on why a new hull had to be made?
It had a lot of noise. Stockton was very verbal about the dives that he did. It was very noisy, and the noise was not coming down, and the sub was probably not strong enough, so he had to make a new hull.
And he told that to you?
to me. I can't speak for anybody else, but I think it was very transparent with people about that.
And when you were down in the Bahamas, did you witness any of the testing, the actual testing that went down?
Yeah, they were taking the sub up and down, parking in the platform. I think in April 2019, they did the first manned test, and I was there when they all came back from the surface, saying that, that first hole, the prototype, it made a lot of noise. And the decision there was made that it was going to have to be changed. Yeah.
Did they ever give you reasons of how they were going to change it to make it not be as noisy, as you say?
Well, I think he was going to go with a different manufacturer to make the new hull.
And the testing in the Bahamas that you attended, was that on your request, or did someone request you to come down and
No,
witness that?
it was open. Stockton always said, anybody who wants to come down to the Bahamas while we're there, please just come. And I did. First time, I also accompanied a photographer that was filming, taking photographs for an article, which are pretty much all the pictures that you see on the OceanGate website. And I was her support diver on those dives.
Were there any other mission specialists in the Bahamas at the time you were there?
2000, the first time around, no, I think I was the only one. 2019, there were others. It was planned for all of us to actually meet. So there were several of us in there 2019.
We're going to kind of shift to the Titanic expedition in 2021.
Mm-hmm.
Were you on the mission for Dive 61, which was the 30th of June on 2021?
I did a couple of test dives. I can't remember the exact number or date, but yeah, it was one of the first dives in 2021. It was integration week, so they had to practice with the crew of the ship the operation. They also had to test when we arrived, although the crane was supposed to be installed, we arrived and they had to build a ramp for to take the sub in the water and out of the water, and that needed to be practiced.
So what was your role on that dive on?
It just observe,
Okay.
observe, give my opinion at that point. Yeah.
On that dive 61, it was to 7 meters. It was the first dive after the deep water testing facility.
Okay.
There was, in the maintenance log, that the dome fell off. Were you there when that happened?
Yes.
Can you kind of describe that event for us?
Well, as we were getting pulled back into onto the ship, it was one of the first times that the crew of the ship was actually handling the platform on the sub. I think I was in the sub because Stockton wanted the view of somebody, whether going down that ramp was noisy, if somebody could actually take that. He wanted somebody's opinion to give it to him. We did some testing underwater, then testing coming back up. At some point, when you're getting put back, becomes a seesaw. If the ship is this way and the platform is this way, the platform starts going up like that, and you're supposed to gently be placed on the ship, and they didn't do that. They literally just let it go. Fell. It was a loud bump, but obviously the forces in the front of the platform or the sub, opposite forces, shear the clamp, and the dome being as heavy as it is, without the dolly that holds it on the bottom, it broke vacuum. There was only, I think, 2 bolts or 4 bolts on the dome, So it literally, without vacuum, it started dripping, falling off. I think after that, the decision was made to put the 18 bolts in, so that wouldn't happen again. And then obviously, there was a lot of conversations between the ship's crew and the controls to try to practice that several times. And I think at the end, they got it right. But at the beginning, it was, I don't think they knew the speed of how to bring it up, to put it on the platform, or even the speed of putting it in the water, trying to measure it with the waves. So that's what the practice that they needed to do.
And do you know the purpose of that dive, what that dive was supposed to be doing?
Tests.
Just tests.
Test the weights, test the sonar, test the DVL, test the DVL, meaning the Doppler velocity. Thing that measures the speed of the sub as it goes down in the water column, test the communications. As we boarded, as I boarded, the other mission specialist and me, I boarded a mission 0, integration. At least for me, we were sat down with Stockton to sign the waiver, read line by line. He gave you an overview of this is what we've done, this is what we've not done. I'm not sure you're gonna get to Titanic and right now because we haven't tested the sub. It's been in a chamber. He told us the numbers of the chamber. You're happy to see the monitoring system if you want. This hull is very silent. You could visibly see the difference between this hull and the other hull. Give you a chance to ask questions. I don't know if he did that every mission. He did it with me. So I knew that week was probably not going to be a Titanic for me. But I decided to stay and watch. I wanted to see that sub go to the bottom.
You said that there's differences visibly in the two holes. Can you kind of go into that?
The first hole, you could see the filaments. Not the filaments, but the way it was wound. This one, it was almost like marble. It was flat. It was just smooth. I'm not an engineer, so I don't know the differences. I could visibly see that, oh, yes, this one looks different.
Okay. And you had talked a little bit about the bolts. Can you go into that again, just for the record? How many did they have, and then how many did they add?
It had 4. They added the full load. I think it was 18.
We're going to kind of shift to the Titanic expedition in 2022.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to go ahead and ask Lieutenant Steele to pull up Coast Guard Exhibit 052, which is the dive log and maintenance log. And I know it's very hard to see, so if you need to use the book, please use the binder.
No, I don't need glasses for this.
According to the dive logs provided by OceanGate, you completed a successful Titanic wreckside dive on the Titan on July 19th, 2022 on dive 81. Is that correct?
Correct.
On the far right column, Lieutenant Steele, if you could scroll to that. I'm going to kind of ask you to take us through that, explain that dive, but I want to read for the record. It states, thruster controls mapped incorrectly, flashing lights, port battery drop, sonar drop, 4K drop, 2KH stuck, 419 after touchdown on Tubbs.
Mm-hmm.
As a mission specialist in the Titan for this dive, can you explain from your perspective on that dive what those notes mean and what happened on that dive, and kind of take us through that dive?
Checks were done the night before. I was there to make sure the pilot did the checks. Checks were done that morning. I was there present for the checks. The propellers were fine. Then we turned off not we, but the sub was turned off while we did the briefing. When we came back to get on board, et cetera, we went through all the checks, sub was turned on. And it was a surprise to all of us when we were taking off the platform that, you know, I didn't even feel it, to be honest. It was a pilot who felt that there was something weird in his driving from the platform. At that point, we were already dropping, but he was texting back and forth to say, what was that? We just did our descent and decided, okay, at the bottom, we'll see what happened. I think we had no strikes, or maybe one strike. That would have been obviously marked as a strike. When we got to the bottom, we landed very gently. Our procedures are that you usually start dropping weight early to slow down. We also were doing experiments to trap water in the column with Naskin bottles, so that also had to be done as you're dropping down. You watch all the luminescence in the window, which is great. And anyway, we get to the bottom to try to get neutral buoyancy, and as we start moving forward, we're not moving forward, we're turning. The sub is so big, you don't really spin. You're turning very slowly. But I think I described it on camera as, oh, we're spinning. We're not spinning. We're moving very slowly, but it was obviously we're not going forward. So we sat down and discussed with the surface as best as possible with the comms, what do we do? We could have, in solutions that were discussed between all of us in the sub, was discussed, maybe we should turn, Alt Control Delete, but then that could have created some issues. So somebody suggested move the controller backwards, so one propeller goes forward and the other one was this way. If you do it the other way around, you go forward. And Scott, who was our pilot, did wonderfully at that. We landed 300 meters away from the bow. We could already see debris when we landed. Questions inside the sub were like, you guys want to go up? What do you want to do? And we all said, we're going. We're very close. And we did a dive. We actually put the pilot in the front dome at some point because it was easier for him to drive and to see. So we all took turns in the window with him. We did a dive, usually 3 to 4 hours. Gave some time to the scientist on board to do what he needed to do with the science and take pictures and explain to us, all the corals. And then we came back up. Lights were flickering. Yes, they were flickering, but you could see. I did not notice any sonar drop. We found the wreck with sonar, so know what that is. When all of us are in the window, in the front, the sub goes down and the sonar looks down, so you cannot see. So you have to balance yourself in the sub in order for the sonar to pick it up. But I did not notice that. At the surface, the batteries did get low. You drive on the surface towards the boat, which drains a lot of the battery, but at that point, you're back. And as we were parking the sub in the platform, it lost the batteries, or the remaining battery life drained. And that's what they call a 419, which is the quick numbers to divers are already in the water in case that happens. And as soon as you do a 419 and you announce on the radio 419, the divers come in, and they had a system where they could pull the sub into position. It was done in like 5 minutes, very quickly, and then we got on the platform. I don't know what other problems were there, but I didn't notice any.
Lieutenant Steele, can you pull up that exhibit just for the record again?
Yeah.
We're still on Exhibit 052. There's the column next to the Exploration Systems Test column, there's a column labeled Risk Index. For Dive 81, the risk index was 34. Do you know what a risk index was and how that was determined?
I don't know how it was determined. It was explained to us how it was determined in the briefings. You pay attention at the time, so you can gauge what is high risk, what is low risk. I don't remember right now if that was high risk or low risk, to be honest.
Do you know how they determined that, though, when they briefed it to you? Like,
Yeah,
what went
they're-
into that?
They're in your dive plan. There's a series of items like weather, people new to the sub, new systems that you're testing. I can't remember all the aspects. I have to look at a dive plan if you have one. But I think those were the items that they would put a number to and give you a risk index. I mean, obviously, if you had all new people in the sub, it would be higher risk. But I don't know exactly what the numbers, if 34 is high or low, I can't remember.
And whose responsibility was it to do the calculations for the risk index?
I think it was the mission director together with pilot.
Thank you. Were you present on Dive 80, the previous dive, in that?
Yes, I was on board on the ship, yes.
Did you stay on the ship the whole time on
Yes,
Dive
I
80?
stayed on the ship for 2 weeks.
Shortly after surfacing on Dive 80, a loud bang was heard. You can see it in there too as well. Do you recall hearing or witnessing any of that?
No. I do remember that there was a loud bang reported as they came back to the surface. It was, in the debrief, was explained to us after investigation, obviously, that, with the change of pressure as you come up, the frame, the top frame that holds the sub, and the legs that could actually be dropped have a little gap. And as they came back to the surface, skipped a little in the change of pressure. And that was the noise they heard in terms of the loud noise. They did an investigation. I actually at some point said, I want to go see it. I went down, and you could visibly see the difference between, the top of that frame and the bottom of that frame moved. It didn't seem like there was any damage to the hull. It was outside too. This is the frame that is protecting the hull, and even the fairings cover it, but.
Did any noises like that ever occur on the dives you were on?
No, the hull was extremely silent. The monitoring system was up throughout the whole dive. You could ask, can I see the monitoring system? And you could see it was sensitive, because when we were using the ramp, every time you went down, there would be a spike, small spike, but there would be a spike, but it gives you a sense that it's working. And then throughout the dive, it's just silent.
So you never heard any noises while you were?
Not at all. You could hear a pin drop.
Did anyone else on that dive, on Dive 80, any of the mission specialists that were on board ever have any conversations with you about the sound they heard, or did you hear, other than that
As I say,
debrief?
we would have debriefs every dive day. There would be all of us required to be at a meeting at 7:30, where everything was what happened, what did we go wrong, what did we go right, what was this, what was the other. So they investigated it, they gave us an explanation. I actually think it's on camera, and BBC probably has it because they were on board. I found them to be very transparent about everything. Anybody could ask any questions. And if you ask questions, like, I want to see the monitoring system for these dives, I said, yeah, come on, I'll show it to you.
And you felt safe going down to the Titanic after that incident?
Yeah. I knew what I was doing was very risky. I never at any point felt unsafe by the operation.
We're going to move into the Titanic Expedition 2023,
Mm-hmm.
missions 4 and 5.
Okay.
Were those the only 2 missions you were involved with for Titanic Expedition 2023?
Yes.
And were you acting as a mission specialist?
No, I was just an observer and a volunteer. I asked to be there if I could, if there was room. I wanted to be there. And there was room, and so I flew in.
Were there other observers there with you?
Yeah, there were, I guess that the families were on board. There were observers. I mean, as in the many years that I was involved in missions, I was very familiar with the operation, especially with divers on board. You know, it's usually 2022, I was mostly on the diver dinghy because I'm very familiar with dive equipment. So, yeah, if there was a role that you could participate in, I was like, I'll do that.
Can we, Lieutenant Steele, please pull up Coast Guard Exhibit 052 again? And then, it's again the dive log and maintenance log. And according to the logs, there was not a single dive where the Titan made it off the platform on those. Can you kind of explain to us why?
Fog. It was too foggy.
And was that part of the strike, part the no-go, or was fog just the cancellation of everything?
It's just a cancellation, yeah. Weather is definitely, if the sea states are, you know, you cannot even get in the water, they would not do a dive. I think they had to be 3 feet. I don't know how much in meters, but it had to be a limit.
Can you explain on dive 87 what happened when the Lars ascended to the surface on that dive?
Yeah, I was on the dinghy with Tim. He did do the checks twice. Somehow one of the tanks was not open, and that when the platform came up, it rolled sideways. They were still tied to the platform, but I'm pretty sure that whoever was in the sub, this whole, you know, squished to one side, so they were probably not very comfortable. It took a while to get it righted up while they were trying to figure out if it was the tanks, it was something else, it would be the best way to bring him up. And then that was it.
Do you know how many people were inside at the time?
Yeah, I think it was 5.
And can you describe the weather on that day in the sea state?
Yeah, I mean, there was some waves, it was windy. There was definitely some chop, but I didn't think it was any heavy weather.
Lieutenant Steele, can you take that one down, please, and pull up Coast Guard Exhibit 023, which is the dive plan 0088,
Mm-hmm.
and we're going to kind of shift to dive 88.
Yeah.
And just kind of scroll a little. Thank you. Ms. Rojas, we could take a break if you would like.
Yeah, I think let's do that.
Okay, the hearing will now recess, and we will just reconvene when the witness is ready to reconvene.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Commander Edmonds, can you please continue?
Lieutenant Steele, thank you. Pulling up, again, we're on Exhibit 023, which is the dive plans 0088. We're going to talk about Dive 88, which is the dive on the date of the incident on June 18th, 2023. Were you assigned to any of those roles listed? Can you zoom out a little? Yep, any of those roles?
I was platform assistant.
The platform assistant? And can you kind of take us through those duties as the platform assistant as you perform them on Dive 88?
It was really just to stand by and then see if team needed help. If he needed a wrench, he needed me to hold something, anything else needed on the platform, if somebody needed, somebody inside the sub needed something from outside the sub. It was really just kind of a go-between. It was mostly standing around till somebody needed help.
And when you say the platform, you're referring to the LARS platform?
Correct, yes. The launch and recovery platform.
Thank you. Prior to submerging the LARS platform on Dive 88, a stop ski was scheduled. Can you tell us why that was scheduled?
They were scheduled on every dive as part of the safety procedures. As you go in time, it's also borrowed from the space program, that's what I understand. It's a 5-minute stop to assess, to look around, to make sure that what you're about to do or what you have done has been done right. Time and opportunity for people inside the sub to decide if they want to go or no go. And, after that 5-minute interval, if anybody says anything, they would stop. Or at least it was our understanding that they would stop. And they, once it was stopped, it was then go or no go from each team.
Can you explain the demeanor of the passengers and the pilot on the day of on the platform?
I saw 5 people smiling, looking forward to their journey, excited. We had wonderful weather. We had been waiting for a while for the wonderful weather. Everything was done on time. So we were all excited.
And prior to going out to the platform, was there a meeting that was scheduled in the
Yes.
morning?
Meeting every morning.
Can you kind of explain what was passed that morning, as you recall, in that meeting?
But you go again through the time of when things are going to happen. That morning, we started operations at 6. You kind of just go through the whole procedure. There was a change of crew that morning, which we started with 1 strike, just because of that. Dinghy driver was changed. But by the time we did the briefing, all the checks had been done, ready to go. Put dinghy number 1 out, then dinghy number 2, I think dinghy went out, had a problem with the power, but it was lifted, changed, and then put back in the water within 10 minutes. So that didn't cause any delays. Things was doing quickly on the platform. I think they were working very smoothly. I was called to help, put the cups up on the frame, the little cups that we take to Titanic dives. Somebody needs to kind of hold them while somebody puts them in place. I also held the bag, as the mission specialists come on board, or as people getting inside the sub, they have to take their hat out, their life jacket out, and we all place that into each individual bag so they know it's their belongings. And I was the one holding that bag for them as they got in the sub. they were just very happy to go. And that's the memory I have. Nobody was really nervous. They were excited about what they're gonna see, make sure you have your camera, that type of thing.
Thank you. Other than the dinghy driver that you mentioned and the dinghy problem, was there anything unusual or different that day that you can recall?
No, no. Not at all. Everything, the weather was great.
After your platform duties, can you kind of take us through your next step, where you went during while they were descending?
Dive went off, the sub went off the platform about 9:15, which is, I think, right on the money in terms of the dive plan. Tim brought the platform up. We proceeded to accompany him in whatever platform duties he had to do. We had tea, a sandwich, even breakfast, although it was really early. Then we finished that. We were all ready. You kind of do it before to be ready for when they come back. We're transported to the ship. Time I got onto the ship must have been around 11. Remember this because breakfast is 11:30 usually. I went to my room, just changed because you're wet, etc. I went up to the bridge to make sure if Wendy wanted any food, kind of check on things, how are we doing. They still had comms at that point, so I went down to get something to eat, although breakfast was not open. We all started to eat, and then I remember at some point at breakfast, we had no update on the comms. Usually throughout dives, Wendy would read out every step of the comms. Even at some point, the message from PH saying hi. PH sends, he said hi from PH, so she read it out. And then that's it. We all kind of went to the bridge to check. We haven't heard from them. We don't know where they are. Where are they? They were very close to Titanic. Very likely that they had made the dive at that point, that they would have gone ahead and tried to at least see the bow. And that was it. They kept us briefed. Said go to sleep, etc. Because if they do come back to the surface, we all need to be here to keep watch of them coming to the surface. We had a briefing. I think it was around 3:30. Procedures were explained to us. You wait an hour. They're supposed to come back. You don't know how fast or how slow they're coming back. Anyway, briefings were at every step to communicate what was going on to us the entire time.
Can we kind of go back to when you're up on the bridge? Were you up on the bridge when they were having communications with the Titan?
Not the
Prior-
whole time, just check on how things are going. I don't know what Wendy ate, but I just wanted to make sure that she ate.
At any time, did you ever see anything on the water, feel anything, hear anything while you're on board the vessel?
Nothing.
What did you understand to be the rescue protocol if something were to go wrong with the dive while the Titan was below surface? If they lost comms?
I said was explained to us, you try to regain comms. Usually they're allowed at least an hour in the bottom. Could it be possible that if they were in front of the bow, everybody begged in the sub to take another hour? Like if it was me in the sub, I probably would have said, please give me another hour. You have to take that into account. And then have them come back to the surface. I think they started doing patterns to see if they could do the tracking and take a read from them. When they were overdue, I think they were due back in the surface at 6. I think that the conversation was another 15 minutes and we're calling the Coast Guard. At this point, they're really overdue. And then that's what they did. Yeah, we went into go mode at that point.
So the plan was to continue trying to get comms, doing search patterns, and then finally calling the Coast Guard?
That's what I understand. I think at least Canadian Coast Guard was already notified before that. But the protocol was to try to do the search.
So as an experienced diver, in your personal opinion, do you believe that was an adequate plan?
That's beyond my pay grade. I'm a technical scuba diver, not a submersible.
And as a mission specialist, you were okay with that being the rescue protocol if something went wrong?
It seemed like we were all helping in taking turns to look at the surface, and that OceanGate was taking steps to follow their own protocols. It didn't seem to be anything of concern until about 5 or 6 p.m.
And what was the demeanor of everyone on the vessel at that time you just mentioned?
I don't think we got concerned until it was really overdue.
Was there ever part of a dive that failed, as in you didn't complete its intended mission that we haven't discussed, that you were a part of?
Can you repeat that?
Was there ever a dive that failed, or you didn't complete its intended mission that you were part of as a mission specialist that we haven't discussed today?
There must have been another that was not completed. Well, did another test dive in Titan in Newfoundland to test different things. I think it was 100 meters.
And what happened with that?
Then we did the dive. It went fine.
Did you ever conduct emergency drills while you were on board the Titan?
What do you mean, emergency drills?
If something were to go wrong, is there a procedure in place for inside the vessel?
They go through all of that, beginning to end, where everything is, etc.
And when is that done?
As people are doing the checks on the sub, once the dome is closed, while you're waiting for all of the vacuum and all of that, they start doing the briefing.
Can you kind of take us through the briefing once the dome's closed and you're inside? Like, what's briefed to the passengers?
What I can recall, it's very wide. They show you literally where the medicine is, where the masks are in case of fire, where is the fire hydrant, you know, what to do if you even have a headache. You know, where is the pump to let go of the legs if in case the pilot is incapacitated, what to do. What else do I go through? Where the maps are and, you know, the communication, things like that. They do give you a briefing on what to do.
Can you tell us what was briefed on the emergency procedures for a dead sub at depth or a sub that couldn't surface, what they told you to do?
Well, most of the work is outside the sub. You're inside, you're safe. It's really the work outside of trying to put you in position in the platform.
And if you were on the surface on the bottom and you couldn't move, or say you got stuck, was there a procedure for how to? what you were-
Surface or the bottom?
Yes.
It's two separate. In the bottom, the submersible had 4 bags of 35 pounds of sand. Those bags had squibs. Squibs meaning something that melts over 24 hours. When all those 4 bags melt and drop, usually that sub can come back to the surface, but very, very slowly. It also had a set of 3 hard ballast that you could drop hydraulically, one or the other, or both. It also had a belly that could be released, and then you also had the legs that you could release. It's like you could use any of those in case you were stuck. You could also wait for the currents to change, which currents do change. And in other Titanic expeditions, we have heard of people getting nudged into the wreck, and then the current changes and it nudges them back. Bottom line, in expeditions, problems happen. I mean, you can even look at documentaries from other expeditions where the problems arise, and then they encounter, they resolve those problems. So you're in a very remote area in the North Atlantic trying to do something that is very few people can do. Problems arise. This is never really sold as a Disney ride. This was an expedition where things happen and you have to adapt to change. That was, at least for me, it was very clear. If you had a problem on the surface, you were at the surface. All they had to do is tie down that sub to the ship. And, if the weather got bad, then you waited till good weather to get put on that platform and taken on the ship. You had life support for 96 hours. Most of the people, there was one dive at least that they spent the night in the sub and they slept.
Were you on that
No.
dive? Okay. Can you kind of tell us about that? From what you know.
The weather, when they came back to the surface, started to get very rough. It was probably safer for everybody just to go to sleep, rest, instead of trying to get divers in the water to try to maneuver the sub. The decision was made that they were going to, it was probably better for them to sleep, to everybody to sleep and wake up 5 hours later and put them back in the platform. And they did it in 5 minutes instead of trying to weather the heavy seas. It was just safer.
Did any employees of OceanGate or past employees ever bring up safety concerns to you?
Tim wouldn't get into sub.
What were those concerns he brought up to you, that Tim brought up?
And Tim wasn't really, I don't know if I consider those comments as OceanGate comments. It was really his own opinions, and he's coming from the outside. But yeah, Tim, spending a lot of time with Tim, you do ask him, would you do this? And he said, no, I wouldn't go in.
And just to clarify for the record, when you say Tim, what's Tim's last
Tim
name?
Catterson.
Tim Catterson, thank you. Thank you, Ms. Rojas. Mr. Neubauer, that's all my questions.
Thank you, Commander Emmons. Commander Whalen now has some questions for you, Ms. Rojas.
Thank you, Ms. Rojas. Thank you, Ms. Rojas. Are you good to continue, or would you like to take a break?
I'm good.
You had mentioned Mr. Rob McCollum in your earlier dealings with identification for submersibles. What was your relationship with Mr. McCollum over the years?
Rob McCollum ran an expedition company called Deep Ocean Expeditions that was taking tourists to the Titanic. In my search of trying to go to expeditions, it was actually very hard to get in touch with them when I finally did. I also signed on to that expedition quite early. That was postponed 2010, then 2011, and 2012 was finally canceled. I kept in touch with him over the years, and he was the first one that mentioned there is a new outfit that is trying to go to Titanic. And he's the first one that mentioned OceanGate.
At any time in your communications with Mr. McCollum, did he ever provide his own professional opinion of the of OceanGate and the Titanic expedition?
Yeah, he did. He said they were probably not going to class their submersible.
And did he provide further?
Nope. That's all he said.
Okay. So in 2015 is when you met Stockton,
Yes,
and you had mentioned the Explorers Club.
correct. I am a member of the Explorers Club.
And can you please explain to me what the Explorers Club is?
Oof. The Explorers Club is a membership of different explorers, anywhere from people who have gone to the moon, who have gone to the deep ocean, any firsts that you have heard in the world of, Alan Shepard, Neil Armstrong, mountaineers, nature, animals, ocean, anything that has to do with exploration. It's the support of all exploration around the world, trying to inspire the world to really seek new worlds. If you are a member of the community that is involved in exploration or education of exploration, you can apply, go on flagged expeditions to help, whatever research is getting done. It's a place where you meet amazing people, and it's very inspiring place, actually.
And did Mr. Rush ever present at the Explorers Club?
Yes, he made a presentation at the Explorers Club.
And did you meet him before
Yes,
the presentation
before.
or after?
Before.
Did you set up or schedule his presentation for the Explorers Club?
No.
Do you recall what his presentations were regarding and what they were about?
Yeah, I think he went through the history of OceanGate, submersibles, and the plans to go to Titanic with Titan.
And
Or
were these,
Cyclops 2, I should say, at that time.
and were these presentations more of an informative presentation, or was it more of a marketing procedure to get other explorers to join the expeditions, in your opinion?
I think it was informative. Explorers Club always looks for, not looks, but if they have members or people that are doing extraordinary things, they tend to invite them to the club to give a talk, and have people have a chance to ask questions.
Are you aware of any other members of the Explorers Club who participated in the Titanic expeditions?
Yes.
And based on your experience, from what you experienced in the Titanic expeditions and what Mr. Rush had proposed in his presentation, was it a similar, what he proposed, was it actually what you experienced?
Yes.
You had mentioned, and I may be mispronouncing, the Britannic dive? Britannic, I apologize. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah, Britannic is the sister ship of Titanic. Its third sister, the Olympic, it no longer exists. It was scrapped. The only one existing replica of Titanic is the Britannic, which sank in the World War II, became a hospital ship. It was sank by a mine, and it sits in 500 feet of water in Kia, very close to shore. I was invited to an Explorers Club expedition to observe. In the expedition, they were using submersibles. And one of those times that I was observing, I was invited to take part in the sub, so I did. It's a 500-foot dive, so most divers go in for 20 minutes and dive and recompress for 6 hours. And I think I was in the water less time, and I got to see the whole thing, which was pretty amazing.
And did you use OceanGate for that? Was OceanGate Expeditions?
No, they were not involved in that. It was a U-boat navigator.
You had mentioned Triton.
Yes.
Is that the same company as U-Boat Navigator, or was that the operating company?
Company is in a different business than Stockton or OceanGate. Triton manufactures subs and sells them to millionaires who can afford to buy one and take people down or do their own expeditions. The expedition company I was with, which was U-Boat Navigator, had a Triton sub, had 2 Triton subs on board.
Do you know if those submersibles were classed by a classification agency?
No, I did not ask.
And can you talk to me a little bit more about the support vessel and that operation? Were they towed to the site? Were they
No, they
driven
were on, they
the
were on
app?
board. It was a very large ship, and it was their own ship too.
Said it was their own ship?
Yeah, the owner of the submersibles owned the boat itself.
At any point during your Titanic expeditions and/or Andrea Doria or the Hudson Canyon dive, was there a second submersible on standby with your expeditions?
Not that I recall.
Did you ever conduct any dives with the first hull of the Titan?
No. Cyclops 2, you mean, the prototype.
Cyclops 2. Okay. And I apologize as I'm jumping around.
Yeah,
It
it's okay.
just kind of follow
It's confusing, but they didn't make a new hull, so.
So with regards to the Andrea Doria,
Yeah,
how much did you pay to be part of that dive?
I think it was $20,000, and that was in Cyclops 1.
I want to talk a little bit about the OceanGate Titan and/or Expedition pilots that OceanGate had. Who were the pilots that OceanGate had that you worked with?
Andrea Doria was Stockton and David Lockridge. Hudson Canyon was Stockton and Kenny Haig. Titanic was Stockton and Scott.
Lieutenant Steele, if you could please bring up Exhibit 52, which again is the dive and maintenance log. Just kind of want to go through a few dives. And just to clarify, what was Scott's last name?
Griffith.
Thank you. And if you can zoom in around dive 61 through 65.
65?
61 through 65.
It's very hard to see.
Apologies.
What tab is it?
It's 52.
It should be 52.
Okay,
What's that?
yep.
So just to confirm, you were on board the Horizon Arctic for dives 61 through 64.
Yes.
So just to reiterate, on dive 61, which was the dive that you were on where the dome fell off as you came on board. After that, was there a safety meeting or a post-dive safety meeting
Yes.
to discuss?
Yes.
Was there anything that you remember regarding that? Did anybody bring up any safety concerns?
we had to practice more with the ship's crew in order to make sure that platform was, and I mean, we, in terms of the whole ship had to be aware of what was going on and et cetera. More the practice had to be coordination between OceanGate and the ship's crew.
And did you witness, where were you when the dome fell off? Were you still in the rigid hull, or were you on board the Horizon?
Inside the sub.
You were inside the sub. Did it completely fall off to the deck of the vessel?
Yeah, it slowly, took time, but yeah, it did completely fall off.
Was anybody injured?
No.
And then I'd like to talk about dive 63. So dive 63 was on July 9th on 2021.
Mm-hmm.
And it was to the depth of the Titanic wreck site, which is 3,840 meters.
Mm-hmm.
And on that dive, there was the drop weight mechanism was jettisoned.
Yep.
And do you recall hearing about why this drop weight mechanism was jettisoned?
Well, that dive was one of the test dives. So there were only 3 people inside the sub. It was the first real Titanic dive, so there were no mission specialists on board. They did a dive. They actually they have sonar too. They were very near Titanic. They saw a lot of debris field, tested a couple of things, and then when they were going to come up, the weight system at the time was I don't even know how to describe it, but it was like I don't even know how to describe it. It's the pipes were in the belly of the submersible. It's supposed to be moved by motor, like picked up and moved out. And they would get nudged. So you had to either, if you were in the sub, you had to kind of shake, shaking or movements of the sub in order for it to fall down. But at some point, they decided we're just gonna drop the whole thing. Would be a good test. And they dropped the whole belly, and they came up to the surface.
So just for clarification, at this time, the drop weight sat in maybe a tray.
A tray. That's a good way to put it. Thank you.
And to be able
English
to
is not my first language.
Understood. And to be able to, if there was an issue with the mechanical or like with the mechanical portion of it to move those weights out of the tray, you would have to rock the sub back and forth?
Correct. There were modifications made after that to try to make that process easier. By the time I came back in 2022, there were different bags that were easily released mechanically, and if that didn't work, they still had the steel pipes where those could be hydraulically released. So they had the redundancy of either one.
So now at this point, they've dropped or they've jettisoned the drop weight tray.
Mm-hmm.
And they resurface. Was there a spare drop weight tray that they were able to install?
Yes. They're not cheap, but yes, they had a spare tray.
How many spare drop weight trays were there? Or
Oh,
are you aware if there were
I don't
multiple spare
know.
drop weight trays?
I don't know, but they had one.
Okay. Then we're going to go on to, next I want to talk about dive 64, which is the next subsequent dive. And I believe you were on dive 64.
That was in the bay?
That was in the bay. It's 89 meters. And on that dive, there was another drop weight issue, that the weights would not drop, according to the log.
Oh, really? Okay. I think we
can
did
sh-
drop one weight. It was, in that dive, it was easy to fill the bladder or in order to come up.
The variable ballast tank bladder.
Yes. But it was an opportunity to test the drop weight system as well.
Scroll down, please. can you scroll down to the maintenance log portion of it, around dive 63? I'm not sure on the page. Apologies.
That's 63. That's the one that they come up fast, right? Is there a complaint here? So which one was 63? Was that
Yeah,
Titanic?
so it would be, in the second column, you'll see a C2_0063. That denotes the dive.
Mm-hmm.
And it would be from July 9th, 2021.
Okay, what about that?
Blame my last 64, my apologies.
And
It'll
where,
be on July 19th of 2020. Oh,
I believe it's page 14.
there we go, thank you, sir. It'll be July 13th of 2021
and can you remind me the location of that?
of dive 64? Or the location of where it is on the page?
64 or 63?
Dive 63 was the one just previous
Yeah,
that we just discussed with regarding having to jettison the drop weight tray.
yeah,
The follow-on dive was a test dive in the bay that you were on.
right.
And what was the purpose of that test dive?
Test the weight system.
And as per the maintenance log, for that dive 64, port drop weight motor would not drop. Weight found jammed, installed mud flap to ensure even deployment of weight.
The dive I was on was 63?
This was on 64.
Yeah, I know, but I'm not sure I was on that dive.
That's the one in Witless Bay that
That's the
lasted
one in
approximately
Witless Bay.
4.9 hours to 89 meters.
Drop 12 weight, okay, yeah, yeah, so,
Okay. I'm just trying to
yeah.
see what the purpose
We
of the
were
dive was.
testing the,
The weights that
we're
had failed
hoping,
on,
or they were testing the system. We and two other mission specialists went along. Again, the dive, you can use the bag to surface. So it was interesting to really see how things worked or didn't work. Part of my due diligence, I would say.
and so but as you explained, the purpose of the weights is to be able to shed the weights to then get positive buoyancy to then come back up.
When you're in Titanic dive, you need to drop weight in order to come to the surface, yeah.
So-
Well, depending on the payload that the submersible has, but you know, you need weight to get down, and they would overweight the sub in order to go down and go through the column. And to come to the surface, weight had to be shed. You could get rid of any of the 8 bags, or you could drop some of that weight that was in the tray. The tray at the beginning was obviously having issues, so he needed to test it in several dives, which he was there. He said, let's see what happens. And adjustments were made when they came back to the surface. I left at some point. When I came back in 2022, the whole system was completely different, and it seemed to work very well.
Okay. But as a mission specialist and having taken part in multiple expeditions, the drop weight system is crucial to the operation and the ascent of the submersible. Would that be a correct statement?
Essential for what? For emergencies? To come back to the surface? I honestly, the sub was very buoyant. I think without those 8 bags, it comes to the surface. So even if everybody was passed out in sub and the squibs melted and all the 4 bags, I think that sub would have come to the surface very slowly because it had a lot more weight in it, but it would come back to the surface.
But they would require whatever the squib was rated for, whether it was 24 hours or 48 hours, and I believe these ones were for
You have to
24
wait
hours.
24 hours for it
Like,
to do
like a
it.
sacrificial animal that would eventually,
Or you could drop from the weight system, the hard ballast, to the weight system and do it quicker. So that was always a decision of whether it's getting bad, come back faster, whether it's okay, come back slower. Obviously, the more weight you took off at the bottom in Titanic depth, not at 500 feet, the more weight that had to be added onto the skids in order for the sub to be placed on the platform.
was there ever a dive that you were aware of where they actually had to wait the 24 hours to the squibs for them to deteriorate enough to drop the bags?
Nope.
You had mentioned Kenny Hague. Was Kenny Hague part of Expedition 2022?
I think he was at the beginning. I don't remember, to be honest. We'll have to check.
And at the time of your dives was, so were you ever made aware of an incident that happened on dive 65, which was on the 19th of July in 2021 to 3,500 meters with Mr. Rush?
To be honest, I don't know if I was present.
Okay.
I don't go by number of dives, I'm sorry.
No worries.
This is July 17th? 21? I don't
July
think I was there.
19th, 2021. You
21.
were not there.
I don't think I was there.
Okay.
I had left already, yeah. '21, I understand, was a year of a lot of testing.
And on that dive, they were too heavy at depth and had another drop weight incident. Were you ever made aware of that?
I was not present at the time.
Thank you. You had mentioned a few times, not a few times, you had mentioned once with regards to a 419 or a 419.
Well, she's the one that mentioned it.
She
but
mentioned it.
yes.
What do you understand a 419 to be?
That's recovery. It was just easier to say 419.
And why was it called 419?
I don't know.
You know?
That was what it was called.
So in 2019, in April of 2019, you were there for the dive in the Bahamas to, I believe it was 3,760 meters.
I was on a ship on the surface, yes.
Was there a Lloyd's Register representative there?
I don't know. There was a lot of people there. I don't know exactly who was there.
And subsequent to that dive in June of 2019, were you aware that there was a crack identified in the hull?
Yes.
And did Mr. Rush tell you or somebody from OceanGate tell you that?
I think it was, I don't know who it was, to be honest. I did know, though.
Around that time, and when we were discussing, you were discussing with Ms. Emmons earlier, the reason stated for the canceling was the canceling of the 2019 Titanic expedition was the canceling of the support vessel, and that the sub was making too much noise.
Yeah.
Can you
Or-
explain to
or-
me what-
Or the crack. I don't know which one came first, to be honest, but it was almost around the same time.
Can you explain to us in what you believe too much noise to be?
Carl Stanley he's outside or inside the courtroom, came up from that dive. He himself said it was too loud. Stockton himself said it was too loud. I think that's why he wanted other people inside the sub to give him an idea of, okay, is this too much noise?
So the submersible itself was making noise.
But that's what I understand. I
That's your
was not
understanding?
inside the submersible.
Understood.
I understand you have people that are gonna testify inside the submersible. He himself said it was loud.
Mm-hmm.
Stockton was very transparent in saying, yep, it's loud. I'm not sure if anybody can take it. I'm not sure it's gonna get any quieter. He would also show you the monitoring system. Like, I asked at some point, I wanted to see the monitoring system from that dive. He would show it to you.
Can you tell me a little bit more about the monitoring system?
It just looked like a EKG with a lot of back and forth in comparison to the second hall, which was like a flat line.
And were they the same systems?
I don't know. I'm not an engineer.
And were you able to view the monitoring system while as a mission specialist on a dive within the submersible?
Yes,
Can you describe to me what that screen looked like?
like an EKG. He would split the screen between the controls and the monitoring system while he was taking the dive in the descent.
And what did you believe that data to be? You said like an EKG, if it had a spike, did you know what that meant?
Yeah, it meant that the monitoring system heard a noise or a vibration.
And do you understand what a noise means, or what that would mean? What is that noise indicative of, or what does that mean?
The sub, even if somebody came and knocked on the hull, it would be picked up. If a whale howled, it would pick it up. So it was just sensitive to the noises around the sub.
Did you ever witness a spike while on a dive?
But when we were using the ramp, it created some very small vibrations.
So we know that there were 8 acoustic emission sensors within the hull. Could you see all 8 at one time on the monitor?
You could see it very clearly. I didn't count them.
And at any point, were you ever told that all of them were fully functioning?
It was probably when we were going down the platform inside the sub. That's when the vibrations usually were seen. Once you start your descent, it was.
In 2022 and 2023, was there ever any discussion regarding the acoustic emission or the acoustic monitoring system and its functionality?
Yes.
And they stated,
There was presentations on the ship on a regular basis. I don't know how many missions they were done, but most of the 2 days that we were transiting to Titanic, the ship had presentations, and we had Titanic experts, there was Titanic historians, and Stockton would do a presentation on the sub and how it was made, the thought of it, how it was dreamt, presentations on the platform, presentations on the deck, what to do on the deck. There was even knot tying training.
so for specific
like that, where you were on the other end of these
Good morning,
conversations,
Charleston.
getting up at.
How are you guys
crack
doing?
of dawn?
Not too bad. This is Stefan in the control room for the Norfolk Southern Media Tour.
Really? As a guest or
Aaron's
as a-
the host. Tom. Copy Tom. You do not sound like an Aaron. Copy that, Mr. Crawford. Do you have an air date for this piece by chance? No worries. Copy. We will hot roll the B-roll.
All right.
And about how long would you like to speak with John Fleps?
This is
Copy,
Charleston,
4
South
minutes.
Carolina.
Let me update our slate.
Okay.
Okay, so stand by. We're going to put your